I'm Sara Goldvine, and this is Let's Talk Housing, a podcast by BC Housing. In this space, we explore the complex systemic issues that make it challenging for many people in British Columbia to access and afford a home. The provincial government has an ambitious plan with the largest investment in housing affordability in BC's history. Tasked with helping deliver on this plan is BC Housing, which is working with hundreds of partners to develop, manage, and administer a wide range of affordable housing and homelessness services in hundreds of communities across the province. In this podcast, you'll hear from those delivering innovative and exciting affordable housing solutions. This week on the show, we're discussing the complex role of homelessness outreach workers and how they help people who are experiencing homelessness, including living on the street or living in shelters, get connected with supports and programs to help them stabilize and move on with their lives. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I am recording from the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We offer our respect to their peoples, past and present. Today, we're joined by Jennie, a Homelessness Prevention Program outreach worker in northern BC who works for the Quesnel Shelter and Support Society. We're also joined by Joe, who is currently a shelter guest in Quesnel and who has been in and out of homelessness in his hometown for some time. Our guests today are joining us from the unceded lands of the Untitled. For full transparency, this episode was recorded in July 2022 and reflects the issues and challenges at that time. Thank you so much for joining us today from Quesnel. And before we get into the questions, we should orient our listeners to where Quesnel is. As I mentioned, it's in the Lataco-Dene territory. It's right smack in the middle of British Columbia, just south of Prince George. And Quesnel has around 23,000 residents. In Quesnel, we have 42 supportive housing units, so 42 supportive homes and approximately 38 shelter beds. Like almost every city in British Columbia and really throughout North America, much of the world, Quesnel is facing an increasing number of people who are unable to afford housing in their hometowns. And many folks are being forced to live in precarious housing conditions or are living paycheck to paycheck. And many have lost their housing as a result. And that's really where outreach workers like Jennie come in. They're on the front lines and they're working directly with people who find themselves experiencing homelessness to help connect them to programs and supports. So maybe, Jennie, we can start with you. Can you explain for our listeners a little bit about what is involved with homelessness outreach? What does your work involve every day?
So there's two aspects to it. One aspect is working on keeping folks who are already housed. There's a lot of people that are marginally housed or at risk of being homeless. So that's sort of half my job. And I help them through providing rental subsidies, either like a one-time crisis grant if they just got behind on their rent. Sometimes landlords will contact me and say, hey, I have so-and-so. Can you just check in on them? They may need a little help. And then I can get referrals that way and go offer some services. The other half of my job is helping people who are currently homeless or have a history of being homeless attain housing and connecting with services. Once I get somebody housed, there's a lot of supports that go into that. And so that's the outreach part where I'm going and providing supports like taking them to doctor's appointments, helping them access the food bank, helping them deal with government things like ministry checks and issues with that. Taking them grocery shopping. I have quite a few clients that when they get their check, they physically aren't able to get to the store, and we don't have the best public transit up here. So sometimes my day can be just simply going and picking up a client and taking them grocery shopping and helping them budget. So there's a lot of things. It's kind of there's nothing I won't do really to support somebody to help them maintain housing and to get housed.
It sounds like your days must be very different from each other. And one thing that I'm hearing that seems to be a bit of a theme is navigating systems, right? Navigating government systems, probably a fair bit of paperwork and processes. How do you work with your clients to really help them understand what they need to do to navigate all those different systems? It seems like a lot of it comes down to communication.
Yes, it does. And unfortunately, a lot of the demographic that I serve are used to having doors closed on them. So when there's a simple hurdle like, say, providing references on a rental application and they don't have references, that's it. They give up and they don't know what to do. And that's where I can jump in. They need a little voice to give them a hand, little advocacy on their behalf. Because the system can be very complex. And even for myself, I'm fairly new to this position. So I'm doing a lot of learning as I'm going and educating myself and my clients as we go along. We're kind of figuring it out together. But I'm a bit of a bulldog and I don't give up until I get the answer or get the right person that can help them.
Thank you. This is a great point to bring Joe into the conversation because we do have one of the people that you work with every day. Joe, can you tell us a little bit more about how you navigated those systems with Jennie? How did you find the space at the shelter?
Well, I kind of always knew about the homeless shelter here, and when I became homeless, I came here and I was they put me in overflow at first because all the rooms were full, and that's just a mattress in the common area. And then once I've been around a while, and they gave me a bed in one of the rooms, and that can be up to 4 people in one room, and it gets kind of crowded and smelly at times, but you do what you have to do. And I just one day asked if I could speak to a housing coordinator to help me find a place to live. And I did find a place. We did find a place, and I'm moving into it today, this afternoon, after 3 years of homelessness.
3 years of homelessness. And just by coincidence, we're recording this on the day that you're moving into housing. What makes you most excited about moving into your new
Being
home
able
today?
to sleep in my own space without having other people around me and having to protect everything I own. Because what I can't lock up, I have to either sleep with it in my bed and carry it around with me all day. Because I don't like sitting around in the shelter courtyard all day long, and it's just boring around here. So I go around looking for things to do and being able to have my daughter come over and visit without having to meet in the park or a restaurant, and I can't really afford on all the time, and because I'm on PWD through social services, not really feasible to go to restaurants and stuff all the time. Once or twice a month is about all I can do, and it's just small meals like get something for her and I sit there and drink coffee.
What meal would you like to cook for your daughter the first time you can have her over in your new home?
Her favorite is just either hot dogs or I make what I call a hamburger helper kind of thing. I just take macaroni and cheese and make it up and fry up hamburger and mushroom soup and mix it all together, and she just loves that.
Wow, you're clearly doing some things right, Joe.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, while you're talking, I mean, I think you've experienced homelessness, you've moved through the shelter system, now you're moving into housing. Um, we have people who listen to this show who are who are people who are in charge of the housing system. What would you tell people in charge that they should do to make it easier for people like you to find shelter and housing?
Just to talk more with with the the people that are homeless in the area, and to get to know them a little bit more, because people struggle on a daily basis with like Jennie said, with just even just simple things as references, and we get doors shut in our face, like because like They do, landlords do criminal record checks, and they want to do credit checks, and well, a lot of homeless people have ruined their credit by trying to get ahead, and and then then and then with criminal record checks, all the landlord has to do is go like court services online in British Columbia, and it brings up their recent criminal history, and then they get the door shut in their face, and it shows everything from a simple thing as a parking violation to to a shoplifting charge or anything. Like, I haven't been charged with anything in 20 years now, but a lot of people have, because me and a friend were looking for a place together, and because he's got a recent criminal record, it was hard for Jenny to find a place for the pair of us. But as soon as I was by myself looking, it got easier because of my history being so far back.
Right. So you're moving into housing, and he's still in the shelter system?
He's living in a camp, actually, living out of a tent, because he's restricted from the shelter right now.
Well, and maybe, Jenny, I can get you to provide a bit of a response there, because Joe's really highlighted many of the significant barriers for folks who want to move into housing. As someone who's working in this system every day, what do you find are some of the most difficult obstacles that people who are experiencing homelessness face when they're trying to navigate that system and get into housing?
Yeah, well, there's so many hurdles. First off, even finding a rental now, everything's on Facebook. Most of our guests don't have internet access or a cell phone. We don't have a public computer out there. That's very difficult. When they do find a rental, we're in a housing crisis. They're going up against, working couples that have dual incomes, and, they may be on income assistance or disability. And even with a rental subsidy, a landlord is much more likely to look at an employed couple than a single person on income assistance. Searching, the CSO online, landlords are doing that now. All you need is a name and a birth date, and they get it off the application. There's so many folks I want to help they're good folks. Yes, they may have some criminal charges in their past, but again, if a landlord's looking at someone that's got, 4 pages of charges in their history and someone who doesn't, they're going to go with someone who doesn't. We have a large Indigenous population here. There are certain, even last names, landlords won't even consider. So, and landlords will outright ask me on the phone, who's it for? Who wants to know, who's looking, if I phone to say, hey, I see you have a vacancy. So I usually don't provide a name. I just sum it up as, well, I don't have permission to provide a name, but I'd like to bring them over to meet you. And then I let the landlord meet them for themselves. But the stigma is just ridiculous here against so many of our folks. People who use substances or have used substances, even if they're on safe supply and they're doing well and they're stable enough to be housed, because we have such a small town, if they've been seen, downtown panhandling or known to have theft problems, it's really hard because landlords just know them by sight, or they know their first name.
Just have heard of them.
Or, just as Joe said, have heard of them. Facebook, unfortunately, can make someone notorious by just a simple screenshot of, hey, this person was seen scoping out a yard. And that can bite them 6 months down the yard or down the road when I'm trying to help them get housed. And navigating the system of if without some kind of help, it's really difficult for my clients to. It's not simple. It's not just go get housed, get a job, get housed. It is very difficult to go from absolutely nothing, no belongings, no food, no anything, into housing. You need a lot of supports. And thank goodness we do have a lot of supports in the community. And my position sort of brings them together to support someone with food and getting set up with dishes. And we rely a lot on donations and things like that. But it is so hard for our folks. I can't even imagine what it's like to start with nothing, no phone, no anything, and try and get yourself housed. It is next to impossible. And I totally understand why a lot of folks just give up, because for me, I understand the system and I get greatly frustrated with how things go and how difficult everything seems to be.
Yeah. There's so much there, Jennie. I'd like to bring Joe in. Jennie's mentioned quite a number of so many challenges, from the systems to the stigma to the application of that in a smaller center. And, as Jennie said, some people just give up. Joe, you haven't given up, right? What powers you to keep navigating through all of those barriers? What keeps you going?
My children. I just want to have my family all back together and under one roof. And they keep me going every day.
I can hear in your voice how much you love your family and your kids.
I would love to just be with them.
Just the significant layers of barriers and complexity and stigma and racism that all come together to make this such a challenging situation. And you're in this work every day. What do you think needs to change?
There's so many things that need to change. Some things seem so big that they seem unfixable right now. Just the sheer housing crisis. If rentals were more readily available, more affordable renters or more affordable rentals, landlords would be more keen to rent to anybody. They wouldn't be looking under a microscope at somebody's, credentials or their past or their last name or their race or their gender. They wouldn't care so much about that. But now, with it being so tight, landlords are being really picky, and that's really hard. It's hard for even somebody that is ready to get employed, if they want to get employed and get, everything comes, you need to be housed first. You need to have a roof over your head. It is really hard when you're staying at a shelter or staying in a tent by the river to get employment, even if you wanted to. How are you, you don't have a way to get a lunch, pack a lunch, do your laundry, get a good night's sleep. It's next to impossible to work while being homeless. Housing needs to come first. We definitely need some more supportive housing units for sure. I do have a lot of folks that would love to be housed, but they just haven't been successfully housed independently because they need those supports. They need staff there to help them daily, not just, weekly or monthly. They need those ongoing supports. So that's needed. I don't know what could even change as far as legislation or anything that would make this easier, but the housing crisis is provincial wide. That's a big factor. Also, their shelter portion is still, and you've probably heard this before and you know this, $375 a month. That is how much a client gets on income assistance towards shelter. I don't know of any town in British Columbia where you can rent an apartment or a shoebox for $375 a month. That is nothing. That is poverty. That is sheer poverty. And the fact that our folks are expected to survive on that is absolutely insane. And thank goodness for programs like the Homelessness Prevention Program, where we can help with rental subsidies so that somebody can actually have a shot at making it and have a shot at being successfully housed.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jennie. And for our listeners, the Homeless Prevention Program is it's called a rental supplement program. So the province, through BC Housing, and for some of our rent supplements as well, with funding from the federal government, provides additional dollars for folks to top up their what they can spend on rent. And the amount depends. It varies based on the program and the city and the person. Well, before we go, I want to bring Joe back in because this is a big day for you, Joe. You're moving into your new home. Tomorrow is going to be your first day in your new home. What do you think you're going to do when you wake up in your new bed tomorrow? What's your day going to look like?
I'm going to make a pot of coffee first thing and make breakfast. I'm going to go get some eggs, bacon and eggs, and have my wife and kids come over for breakfast. And when they come in, they can sit down and eat. My daughter, she's 9, and my 17-year-old boy, he's still at home. And my 22-year-old daughter, she's living with her boyfriend. Won't be far from where I'm moving to. And my 27-year-old son, he's on the west side of town too. So all three of us will be within walking distance of each other. And both my children, older children, have vehicles, so they can come see me more often. Because they really don't like coming down to the shelter to visit me. But it'll be nice to be able to just sit with my family and have a meal. That's what my plan is.
That's a beautiful plan. Eggs and bacon and coffee with your family.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of what is going to be a very busy day, Joe, to talk with us today. And thank you, Jennie, for joining us as well. It's been really wonderful to have you both on the podcast. Let's talk again soon. To learn more about BC Housing or to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit our website at bchousing.org.